Lucy Letby becomes the most prolific child killer in our history, one of the most prolific serial killers as well. This is a particularly grim story. You've covered crime for many years. It hardly gets more horrendous than this story, Danny.
Afternoon, Ian. Yes, it is absolutely horrendous. And Lucy Letby, I know that the interview there with the Detective Chief Inspector was saying that it is time to focus on the families of the babies and to think about them and what they have lost and how awful this has been for them. But inevitably, Ian, as you know, attention will focus on Lucy Letby, the serial killer, the baby serial killer, whose name will be set alongside other people who have committed such horrendous crimes, such as Harold Shipman, Beverly Allitt, who was convicted of murdering 4 babies and attempting to murder 3 others, and also Colin Norris, who murdered 4 elderly patients. He was also a nurse as well. And Lucy Letby's name will be amongst those as one of the worst serial killers in British history. It is inevitable that she will be given a whole life tariff, meaning that she will never be released from prison. And I suspect that there will also be continuing investigations into other suspicious deaths as well, and other births, other children who were in her care. I'm sure there will be inquiries, if there haven't been already, as to whether she has had anything to do with any problems that they have had. Because although she's been convicted of 7 murders and 6 attempted murders, inevitably there will be questions as to whether there have been others.
And indeed, and I think those questions are now being asked, and there will be further inquiries, Danny, into what is happening there. And there is a fascination, of course, and we have a human fascination with serial killers. Documentaries are made about them. Our own Piers Morgan has done TV programmes interviewing people guilty of these horrendous crimes. And, you know, ultimately, we never always find out why. We don't really know. We take some guesses. Sometimes that person will offer some information. We never fully get the full picture of what goes on in the mind of someone who's capable of such horrors.
Yes, and it does appear at the moment that here you have someone who was just an average person doing a job that, you know, thousands of other people do, and there was nothing in her background or her personal life that would explain what she's done. And indeed, the answer to what she did will probably lie in the depths of her mind, and only she will know what it was that was driving her. Whether it was an attempt to get attention, and then she just got the sort of an addiction for it, if you like, whether she just couldn't stop herself, whether it was became an obsession. We just don't know. Whether she has some kind of undiagnosed mental illness, that remains to be seen as well. Sometimes these things are explained by a mental condition. In Beverly Allitt's case, she had Munchausen syndrome by proxy, which was a condition which was about sort of, causing problems to other people in order to get attention, and so on, causing illnesses, etc. We don't know. Why did Harold Shipman murder so many elderly patients? Was it the power that he had, and then he was able to get away with it? There's always a combination of factors, aren't there, Ian? And I suppose one of the issues that will be looked at are the procedures in that neonatal unit. We now know that senior hospital doctors had raised concerns about her very early on, within several months of the first murder. I think in autumn 2015, the first murder was in June 2015. Concerns have been raised. They were sort of swept aside, and it took a long time before she was eventually suspended. An investigation was started, and she was arrested. So I have no doubt that there will be calls for some kind of public inquiry into what went on at that hospital and whether or not the alarm should have been raised earlier and dealt with more quickly.
And what is interesting, I think, Danny, as well, when it comes to these kind of cases and serial killers, is that it's only when you've seen the evidence and you look back, the clues are there. You know, Harold Shipman with the clumsy handwriting on prescriptions, etc., where it was clearly his. In this case, with Lucy Letby. She was on every shift. It wouldn't take a genius to work out that at some point she was at least going to get questioned for this. And you wonder whether in the psychology somewhere there is a curious dark desire to actually be caught, given that there is quite clear, unequivocal clues early on, in this case, very, very early on, to suggest where the finger should point.
I think in this case, Lucy Letby has done everything not to be caught. She denied all the allegations. She blamed sort of poor practices. She, blamed all sorts of other things. It didn't appear that she wanted to be caught. But I think it may have been that her colleagues and the general atmosphere in the unit at the time was such they couldn't believe that someone like her would do something like this. It's, we can all have suspicion sometimes about colleagues, on, lower level issues on behavior and so on. But sometimes you don't want to believe that that's the truth. And then confronting someone about that is a really difficult thing to do, particularly if you're talking about something so serious as babies' lives being lost. So you can understand for a while a reluctance perhaps to deal with it, but certainly after 3 or 4 months, there were senior consultants, Dr. Stephen Breary and Dr. Ravi Jayaram, who were raising significant concerns, and it does appear that the management of that unit were not taking them seriously enough. So, I don't think there's any suggestion that Lucy Letby didn't want to be caught. She was never actually caught in the act. No one saw her.
This is true, but it's only, and you're right, Danny. I mean, the clues might have been there, but the ego, the thumping ego of the psychopath, and that is clearly what we're dealing with here, perhaps just continues to think, it's never going to be, no one's ever going to think a nice girl like me is capable of this.
Yeah, but what's interesting also is her reaction. I mean, what obviously viewers and listeners won't know is that the verdicts have sort of been trickling in over the past 10 days, but there have been reporting restrictions in place which have prevented the media from reporting any of those verdicts until the proceedings were concluded, which happened today. And at the first time that the verdicts came in, Lucy Letby's reaction was to cry. I think on the second occasion, she was also distraught and sobbing. And today she didn't appear in court. Now, I don't know, but that doesn't suggest to me the demeanor of someone who was waiting to be caught and wanted to be found out. I'm not a psychologist, I'm not an expert, but it appears to me that this is a little bit more complex, and that the answer to what she did may lie deep in her psyche, and we may never know. Now, of course, for the police, they don't have to establish motive. It helps if there's a clear motive, because they can present that to the jury and say, here's the reason why she did this. They didn't have to do that. What they had to prove, beyond reasonable doubt, is that she committed the murders or the attempted murders through all the evidence that she was always present when a baby died, from her movements, from other circumstantial evidence. She took home some documents. She wrote a diary entry talking about her being evil and so on. So there was a lot of circumstantial evidence that came together, but they never could find the motive.